Hello, I am Mudita, and welcome back to Satisfactory. This is my 1.0 playthrough where I attempt to load balance all my factories. For some reason, this is what I call fun. In the last video, I added more petroleum coke and plastic. Now I have the resources needed to complete the next floor of the large electronics factory in the Grassy Fields. This should create all the circuit boards through supercomputers I need for the final factories. And this factory is going to get a little bit taller today. Well, first things first, can't believe I made this front part so not symmetrical, and surprisingly no one actually pointed it out. I don't think there were too many shots of it in the video, but yeah, it's driving me nuts that the window just isn't even with that gap. So I'm going to fix that. I think I just need to extend it on this side. Yeah, and that'll make it even. Okay, so I just need to push this out 2 foundations. Make it look a little bit more symmetrical. This floor is just working away. You'd love to see it. So thankfully, everything looks good on this floor. So I'm going to shut down this entire floor, get the next phase of the factory going, and then we'll flip all of this on, and then this and the next floor will get to come to life. It'll be fun. But before I can do that, I need to be able to build the second floor, so I need a ceiling. And there's one other thing I want to add to this floor. I was watching one of Kibit's videos, and it inspired me. So I think I'm actually going to try to do a little bit of decorating, but actually make it useful. Let's see how that goes. And this right here is what I've come up with. I know it looks a little bit weird, but it's a power storage, and then I use the outer corner extensions. They're basically just, let's see, 1 meter out from the very center of each other. So it's a 2-meter gap in between the two sides. And then a beam to run down the middle. And then I just added just a tiny 0.5 meter square sign. And then just a 1 meter foundation. And that's actually why the beam is there, is this will ever so slightly clip through. And just the beam looks good in my opinion. And now with this being a blueprint, I can easily stack this up to the ceiling. And I have a pillar that's also functional. It'll have a couple batteries in there and increase my power storage capacity. So this is how it started. And then it evolved into this because I thought, well, if I'm going to make them pillars, I could connect them all and make them walkways. So I've got this one, and then I can use the other one to stack on top of it and create a pillar. And then using this and some more glass foundations, I can create some walkways in between them. And you know, before you know it, the factory is filled with all of these pillars with walkways in between them, and I really like it. And the great thing is each one of these has 4 power storage. So, you know, they start to add up after a while. Up until this point, I only have one place that has batteries, and it's out by my coal plant that I built just so long ago. And it's been enough, honestly. But the end game, I'm going to start to see these spikes get a little bit more crazy as I build more converters, particle accelerators, and the encoders, because all of those will fluctuate a good amount with power. And the more that I have, the more this is just going to vary, and the spikes are going to get crazier and crazier. So I thought it would be a good idea to start adding more power storage in my world. Who knows, maybe this is a horrible idea, adding just more to the factory like this, but I like the idea of making them functional, and I'm really happy with the way that they turned out so far. And then I'm going to fill up the rest of this floor, and this factory will probably look way more supported than any of my other factories, which I think will be nice. And yeah, I like the way that it turned out. So now I've got some pretty nice walkways, although I just keep using the hover pack everywhere. But at least now I've got some good walkways, and they're glass, so you can at least see what's going on underneath, because eventually I'm sure there's going to be belts going everywhere. These all do the same sort of thing upstairs too, but now I can easily walk around the whole factory. So one of the things I actually really love about this is I can actually just check on my power, which I realize probably sounds really silly, but I'm not using any of the normal power poles anywhere, and all of the power is being fed underneath, right? So even if I wanted to, I need to go underneath so that I can grab a connection, and then I need to grab a pole, and then I can check on the power. So it's kind of silly, but it's also just kind of nice. you know, when you're in your factory, sometimes you want to be able to check on your power and see how it's doing. I started today with 10,000 and now I'm up to 1640. So that's a pretty good increase, and we still have another floor to build. So that's the next step. I need to add the second floor, and then I can add more pillars. Well, eventually. There's a lot of machines I need to place first. I don't come back to my home factory that often, but it's a beautiful sight, isn't it? So this right here is the kind of logistics underfloor area of the storage. So if we go right to the next floor, we got all of the storage bins, which is obviously way more than I need for just about everything. But in a factory game, can you really have too much? So most of it is just extra and sinking right now, giving us those juicy sink points. And then if we come through here, right underneath the hallway, because it's got all of the glass and my lizard doggos are right out there, this is my hallway of dimensional depots. This is most of them that I have in the world, although concrete has a few scattered amongst the world because I think I have like 14 total. Obviously, for the late end stuff, you really only need one, and it's going to be more than enough. However, some of the other things I've realized I started to need more of. So any of the built materials, I have at least 2. I haven't really needed more than that. But then you get to some of the items that you use quite a bit more, and so most of these are triple stacked. And this is actually the reason I came back here, is I needed to add 2 more for plastic. Up until this point, I just hadn't used that much plastic. But of course, I decided to use a blueprint that's going to use coated concrete, and boy oh boy, can those 6x6 blueprints chug through concrete and plastic. So I came back to add 2 more, and hopefully 720 per minute will be enough. But because of blueprints, even the steel pipes I wanted to have triple, because when you start placing a ton of refineries, you need a lot of steel pipes. With steel beams, 3 is good enough most of the time. There are times I can actually use it faster. And then with the rest of the same sort of thing. Copper sheets, the large majority of the time, totally fine with 1, but every once in a while I would start to use blueprints that would use just a ton of them at a time. And you know what, if I start placing a whole lot of these power storage, I'm probably going to want at least 1 more wire, and, well, let's be honest, if I still have 23 Mercer spheres, I might as well just add 2. Even though it's only 100 a piece, I can go through them pretty quickly. Coated concrete does have just such a cool shine, doesn't it? So yeah, this is why I needed some more dimensional depots, because I decided to do something silly that I normally never do. And that's because this uses an insane amount of concrete when you do this. But shout out to What Darren Plays. I love his videos. And one of the things he really likes to do is on his ceilings, he'll use 2 different materials so that your roof will have one look and then your floor can have a different look. And I've always loved the functionality of this because it makes sense and it gives it such a better look than the way I normally do it, as I just don't care what weird patterns I have on the roof. But say I wanted to highlight a walkway or something like that up here. Well, it may make a whole lot of sense up here where all the machines and the belts are placed, but then when you come underneath, it just looks really weird. It's just like a random stripe just out of nowhere that just doesn't kind of fit with anything else. And then if you ever need floor holes or anything like that, you just have to delete 2 of them. You place a full 4 meter, and then you can get the floor hole that'll go straight through, and then you just delete it and then replace the individual ones. It's a little bit more work, and it's absolutely 100% just for the looks. Other than that, there's no good reason to do this because it doubles the cost of your blueprint. Look at that. 432 concrete and 72 plastic for each one of these. And so if you start laying them down rather quickly, I can absolutely beat my upload speed of all of those dimensional depots. And there we go. So it's the plastic that's the short. But hey, it's still fast enough. And that's honestly just a ton of resources. And the fact that I don't have to keep going back or loading up the project train anymore like you used to. Oh, chef's kiss. Just so much better. And in case you're wondering, this up here is just using the carbon steel. And then under the patterns on the customizer tab, I'm using the cross path as the pattern for all of this. And if you use it on all of them, it gives it that kind of fun extra little pattern. I was building my ceiling and I noticed a couple buildings went yellow and I just did not understand why. And then I traced it all the way back to here. And why is the miner not at 100%? Like, I can't think of it. The only reason that I know of that a miner shuts off would be that this fills up. So if this reaches 100, then it turns off, right? Because just like anything else, it has its internal storage. Once that fills up, it can't grab anymore. But if it's not filling up, which I mean, granted, if it did fill up at some point, it would empty really quickly. So maybe that happened, but none of the machines are that full, so I don't see how that would have happened. And I haven't had any power issues. Very curious. Well, this floor finally has a roof, and it looks a little bit more complete. I mean, it definitely does need some walls, but hey, it's a step in the right direction. And now, if we come up to the next floor, we've got a huge area to work with, and some blueprint designers. So here's everything that's going to be happening on this floor. And as you can see, the large majority of the inputs are gold because those are basically like manual input because they're coming from the floor below or they're coming from drones or trains. But because there's a lot going on, I'll highlight each section as we go through the blueprints. And if you'd like to follow along or take a look at this afterwards, this production planner will be linked below. But here are all the things that I have as an input, and I rounded on some of them. And a list of all the alternate recipes. And here's the total amount of buildings, although I think we'll use some power shards again. To kick things off, we'll start with circuit boards, and we need a lot of them. So in total, I need 600. So to do that, we're going to use these blueprints right here. And they're basically just a mirrored setup. The difference is where these splitters have their inputs. So these ones have it facing to the right, whereas these ones are facing to the left. So with most of my blueprints, I can then place some splitters in the middle and I can easily join the two sets. I'm going to fully overclock these to 250% because normally I would need 120, but at 250%, I can get away with only using 48. And the numbers just work out beautifully because I'll need 50 rubber and 100 petroleum coke. So let's do the math on the petroleum coke, and then half of that will be the amount I need for rubber, right? So if each one of these needs 100, that means a set of 6 needs 600, and a full set of 12, when I join these two blueprints together, will use one full Mark 6 belt, which means that it'll also need 600 rubber. And so I'll just need 4 sets of these, and that'll give me my 48. And all of a sudden, 600 circuit boards aren't too bad. I do need quite a few other assemblers, but this was actually the biggest amount of them, and the rest of them I'm going to more or less freehand. And by freehand, I mean I'm just going to use my blueprints that don't have the recipes already set, and I'll just kind of manually do it because I don't need too many, and I want to lay them out a little bit different than the way these blueprints are. So let's move on to the manufacturers. First up is the high-speed connectors. So I need 1500 silica, 120 of those circuit boards that I've been making, and then 3600 Quickwire. Now normally I would need 40 manufacturers, so if we fully overclock these, I only need 16. And each of these blueprints will do 4, and then since the splitters are facing in towards each other, I can easily join up 2 of them. So one set of these will do 8, and that's half of the manufacturers that I need. So only the circuit boards will have 1 input. Silica, since I need 1500 in total, one set of 8 will get 1 belt of silica. And then since each of these manufacturers need 225, one set of 4 needs 900 Quickwire. And thankfully, right down here, every single one of those belts is 900. Almost like I planned this. Next up, crystal oscillators. And I need 120. With the default rate being 1.875, that normally would have taken 64. And 64 is actually a pretty nice number to deal with. So if I completely overclocked them, 25.6, not a good number to work with. And that's why these ones are only overclocked to 200%, because 32 being a power of 2 just makes load balancing super easy. Doesn't get much better than that. So again, I'll be able to join them up so that I have 8 together, and then I'll just need 4 sets of 8 to get to my 32. And then as far as the inputs go, it's 1200 quartz crystal, so that can all come in on one Mark 6 belt. So I just need 1 input to feed all of these, making the load balancing really easy. And then last but not least for the machine blueprints, the radio control units. So as you can see, 80 computers, 40 crystal oscillators. Those are nice and easy. 1280 aluminum casings. Of course, it has to be just over what I can fit on one belt. But that's okay. We just put those on two. Again, with the way the numbers worked out, normally I would need 32 machines, which is a fantastic number to work with for load balancing. So we're only going to overclock it to 200% to cut it down to 16 instead of doing the full 250%. And gives me just nice, even numbers to work with. And that's it for the blueprints, for the machines at least. Let's get to placing them. Alright, so I've got this huge open area, and I really like the way I did it down below. Instead of having different rooms, it's just kind of one big open thing, and then we'll have some pillars and walkways going everywhere. I really like the way it turned out, so we're going to continue that with this whole factory. So the way I'm thinking about laying this out is a little bit different. I think I'm going to do like one row of manufacturers kind of along this edge, another back here. We're going to do the circuit boards in the middle, and then more manufacturers here and here, and then kind of in this middle area on either side is going to be where I put all of the rest of the things, because I need much fewer machines and I'll be able to kind of fit them in a smaller space. Alright, so let's start here in the back corner and kind of work our way forward. Give myself a few foundations. Yeah, it should be good. Alright, so we'll start with this one, and then that way the inputs are facing this way. And then we can switch to A. There's 16 manufacturers, so that's half of them. So if I continued it going, I would go way farther than I want, because I think somewhere around here is about the middle. So why don't I just mirror it, and then I'll have the two halves facing each other. Since there's only 3 belts being plugged into here, I think it shouldn't be too bad. So let's work from this side. Now I'm just going to flip it basically. So we pick this one. I always forget that this happens. So I'm so used to lining the blueprint up with the edge of the foundation, but if you add a beam to the edge, it basically adds 1 meter. So this thing has 1 extra meter on both sides, so I actually need to nudge it in place. And then my mergers are right on the edge, which just makes the load balancing easier. It's nice and clean that way. So I'll have to redo this whole side because these are all 1 meter farther back than they should be. Alright, so there's the crystal oscillators, and then let's start with this corner and we'll do the other side. So on this side I'm going to do the radio control units. And there's the 16 manufacturers I need. And I've got a good amount of space right down in the middle. Perfect. Let me finish up the manufacturers. So next to the crystal oscillators, I am going to put the high-speed connectors. Alright, so I just discovered something really cool just right now while recording. Let me show you. If I go into this tab, my Grassy Fields factory right here has just a ton of blueprints, right? It's more than will actually show up in the radial menu. So if I hold down E, you can get a whole bunch of them, right? But they don't all show up because there's so many. If I click with the left mouse button, it will switch to the other ones. And then I can switch back. Mind blown. I had no idea you could do that. The funny thing is on the very left and right of the screen, it absolutely says previous and next with left and right mouse button, but I've never ever once noticed that. So many hours in this game. And there's 16 manufacturers for the high-speed connectors. And then next to the radio control units, I decided to put the computers, which I think I may have forgotten to go over the blueprint. So obviously it's basically the same sort of thing. Instead of using the base 4 manufactured blueprints that I have, I'm using my 6 blueprints, which need 2 to do because it's in a set of 4, and then you have a set of 2 that you just join. So I need to make 100 computers. So fully overclocked, these can make 9.375. So 100 divided by 9.375. So I need at least 11 machines to do this. So 12 machines would be the easiest. So if I'm using 12 machines, each of them is going to be clocked to 8 1/3. And the easiest way to do that is just to do 100 divided by 12. And then I went ahead and placed the assemblers. So it ended up having pretty nice spacing, putting it right down the middle. I've got a good amount of space for any of the belt work and my walkways and all that jazz. And then I just have 4 rows of these. All right, so I've got 2 of these kind of like little platforms so that I've got a little bit of space to do some belt work underneath. And then I can put all of the other machines because I only need like 2 blenders and stuff like that. So I think I'll be able to lay things out in a pretty cool way up here. And of course I made it a blueprint just to make things easier, but that's obviously not the cool part. That's just super simple. Cool part is the wall I made. So I thought this would be cool and I could incorporate some more batteries. So this is just high enough. Let's see, so this is 3 foundations tall. So in here it's only 2.5. Place 2 and then it'll be the 2 meter. Fits perfectly. So this does do a little bit of clipping. I am clipping a little bit of the floor through the top of the power storage, but the power connection doesn't poke through the top, which was kind of what I was going for. If it did, I would have to go a little bit taller because that would look weird. But I think it's a pretty cool look. So you'll be able to see the indicator right here on the front, and then I just use some square signs. And if you didn't know, they obviously attach to walls just fine, but if you're looking at a foundation on the top or the bottom, if you hold control, they'll lay flat. And then you can still use the middle mouse wheel to scroll it around to whatever angle that you want. But that's how I get them on the ceiling here. So just added a row of those, and then that, and then just kind of switch it up with, you know, some 1 meter basic walls. And then this way that they're flexible, and now I can swap these out. So in a couple spots, I'm going to need to put some conveyor wall holes, and then that's how I'll get resources in or out of here. But that's what I did. So these are the little platforms that I made. And then I just used Fixit inner corners because those ones you can paint with the different colors really well. I think this is something that I want to incorporate more, is adding the power storage into the build here and there. So it's not like it's a ton of extra power storage, but if you place enough of these, they start to add up after a while. So I've got one here and then one platform over here. So this is what the floor looks like so far. Oh yeah, and then I decided, because, you know, I'm just kind of a sucker for symmetry. Although I didn't do it quite on this side, but it just looked really off only having the 1 row of manufacturers. And so I just took the power shards, added these. These ones are all just clocked to 100%. So it's a few more machines, but hey, I save a little bit on power. And I just like the way that it looks better. And the irony of me saying I did it because I really like the look and the symmetry, and I didn't do that with the manufacturers. I could have placed the same amount that are on that side, but I actually wanted to leave more space open right here just for the load balancing, because down below is probably where I'm going to do my drones. Because this is just a nice stretch of just kind of emptiness. So down along here I think will be a good spot, probably fit them in between these little pillar things. Would be a good spot to put the drones. And so if I put the drones there, some of the resources are going to need to come up to this floor, and so I'm just going to leave this space a little bit more open, just in case. Alright, so the way it's going to break down, because there's quite a few other things we need to do here. So on this side, the platform is going to take care of the AI limiters that I need for the crystal oscillators, and then basically doing the whole process for the electromagnetic control rods. And then that side is going to do with the aluminum casings that I need for the radio control units. And then the bulk of it is going to be making the supercomputers. Alright, so this platform is 12 foundations wide. So if we just get these lined up right on the middle mark, I think that should be enough space. Yeah, that should be enough space still. Alright, so we'll place one here. And then we can place the other one on that side. Thankfully, using the plastic AI limiter recipe, this is fairly easy. 1800 Quickwire, 420 plastic. Normally I would need 15 machines, but fully overclocked, we can bring that down to 6. And so each machine needs 300 Quickwire, 70 plastic. So the plastic can all get load balanced across one belt. Each assembler needs 300 Quickwire, so a set of 3 of them needs, you guessed it, a 900 belt of Quickwire. Alright, so like I mentioned, the rest of this space is going to be making the electromagnetic control rods. So let's go ahead and actually just start with those. And we're going to do these actually sideways instead of doing them kind of the way we've been doing them. So this is going to go down this way. Alright, so if we take a look at the flowchart, Normally, this would take 30 assemblers, same with the stators that I'll place next. But if we fully overclock that, we can bring it down to 12, which is just a really convenient number. I tried to lay these out in a couple different ways, so in some future shots you may see these in a slightly different configuration, but let me just show you the final configuration because it makes way more sense. So we're going to have a set of 3, and that's going to do the electromagnetic control rods. So let's go ahead and set that recipe. And for this, I'm going to be using the alternate, fully overclocked, so each one will output 20. This will require 20 stators and 10 high-speed connectors. So the high-speed connectors are going to be coming from right over here. So the next step we need to do is the stators. And so for this, we're just going to line it up next. So I may have to play around with the spacing a little bit, but right about here is probably where that's going to go. I still have hard drives that I haven't scanned, but I can't actually scan anymore. I don't think. Oh, I guess I can. Oh, I've already used those rescans. But anyway, I have tons, and the recipes for most of these are just sitting here waiting for me to finally use them. Go ahead and delete that. I can go ahead and set my Quickwire stator recipe. Here we go. And nope, didn't need that one. And we'll fully overclock those. And so these will output the 20 stators, and these intake 20 stators. So instead of joining them and then resplitting them up, it's going to look a little bit funny. It's not my favorite thing, but I just think it makes way more sense. I am actually going to just delete these bottom belts. And then in straight mode, it's going to have that, which definitely isn't my favorite thing. But if you're going to do a direct feed from one assembler to the next, you kind of have to make that decision whether the machines are going to be lined up or you want the belt to be completely straight. Unfortunately, you just got to make a choice if you want them lined up like this. So for me, I went with the machines being lined up. The Quickwire will be coming from down below, and each machine needs 150. So that means a set of 3 of them would need 450. So a set of 6 needs a 900 belt. And the last step, I could keep everything completely centered. I guess this would make way more sense, but I'm just going to line this up right here. I'm going to use one of my new favorites in 1.0, the iron pipe. Ah, it's just so great. I love this recipe. Fully overclocked, it'll actually put out 62.5, which is more than I need. I actually only need 60. So 2 of them will output 120. And each one of these needs 40. So a set of 3 of them needs 120. So there we go. All done. And in total, I'll need 1920 iron ingots. So I just need 4 sets of these. So I just need to place 3 more. And then it'll be 240 electromagnetic control rods per minute. All right, let's take a look at the other side. So I'm going to do the same sort of thing that I did on this. So the very edge, so this part right here is going to be feeding these machines with the parts they need. And then I'll have the rest of this for all the rest of the machines that I need to place. All right, for the aluminum casing, I'm going to use 9 constructors. So let's go ahead and find the middle. Yep, right there. So we'll go ahead and place the middle one, and then 1 more set on either side. And I know if I used a bunch of copper, I could save a few hundred aluminum ingots, but thankfully, I made a whole lot of aluminum ingots, so I can actually just make things a little bit easier on myself at times. Fully overclocked, these would output 150, which I think is a little bit more than I need. So in total, I need 1280, and I'm going to use 9 machines. So each one of these is going to be clocked to 142 and 2/9. Well, that should be fun to work with later. But that's a future Moo problem. Let's keep laying down machines. For the supercomputers, I'm going to go ahead and work backwards again. So I'll go ahead and start with the assemblers I need for the supercomputers. So we can go ahead and just space these out a little bit. I may change around the particulars of where they go, but it's going to be somewhere around here. And then I'll probably flip around these mergers so that they're facing in. That would make a little bit more sense. Or actually, I probably only need to do that for one of them. So if we take a look at the recipe, I'm going to be using the OC supercomputer, which is really nice because I just need radio control units and cooling systems. So the radio control units are going to be coming from right back there. And then the cooling systems, we need some blenders. So for that, I'm just going to use my 2 blender blueprint. It looks about right. And then we'll just place another one right across from it. think I forgot to actually overclock these. So I need 25 across 4 machines, so 6 1/4 for each one, which means I need equal parts of these, 12.5 cooling systems, so a set of 2 of these needs 25. But again, these are going to be clocked to the same thing, so I'm going to be able to direct feed them. And I'm going to be using the default recipe, just the cooling system. So heat sinks that I'll have to deal with, rubber I'm bringing in, water is easy, nitrogen's pretty easy. And then I just need this to output the same amount. So the cooling systems are overclocked to 12.5, which make all of these numbers really nice, except for nitrogen. That's an unfortunate number. Just over 300. So we'll definitely have to redo the pipes a little bit. But again, that's future Moo problem. Alright, so now I need to make heat sinks. And for that, I just need my 2 assembler blueprint. So we can place one on this side, and then we'll place the other one over here. For this one, I'm going to be using the heat exchanger recipe. This, I just need aluminum casings and rubber. So again, I'm bringing in the rubber. The aluminum casings is the last step I need to make for this. And with these, they are going to be fully overclocked. And clearly, I messed up the spacing. So we're going to need to squish some of these a little bit more together, which is fine. I gave myself way more space, I think, over there. But the very last step is I just need a couple more constructors. Actually, just 2. And these are going to do aluminum casing. And these are also going to be completely overclocked. And that way each one puts out 150 casings, and each one of these assemblers needs half that, right? Yep, 75. So that all works out. Alright, so let me fix the spacing on this, and then... Oh, it looks like I'm future Moo now. I'm going to have to do this belt work. Alright, so now they all fit. So just needed to shorten this gap a little bit. And this still has plenty of space, and now it's just the one constructor can feed into these. So it should be nice and easy. And I'm just now realizing I think I placed these ones backwards. I think I want this one where this one is. So I need to flip-flop, well, basically this whole set of 6 with that whole set of 6. So I'm going to do that, but all right now. Now I'm just going to go through and do what I call just the basic belt work. So it's just connecting all the machines so that I just have basically input and output to deal with. And I do have to be mindful of the amounts that I'm dealing with, right? So the way that I always plug these in is the more full belt is on the bottom. So that's going to be Petroleum Coke. 1200 is going to plug into here, which means that I'm going to need Mark 5 because that's going to be 600 going this way, 600 going this way. Rubber's on top, and 600 is going to get plugged into here. And so that means I need a Mark 4 because that'll be 300 going this way and 300 going this way. Alright, so I think I'm going to do something like this to get them plugged in. I'm going to use a lift, and then we'll have the rubber plug in up here. So like I said, so that's going to be 600. So that plugs in right there. And then basically opposite of this, we'll have a Mark 6, and that's going to do the Petroleum Coke. And then I'll do the same sort of thing all the way across. So all of the Petroleum Coke is going to get brought in on this side. So I'll have all the Petroleum Coke lines going through here. And then with the rubber, I'm going to have a 600 belt, and that's going to come out to here. But then I'm also going to have, but I'm going to have 4 600 belts. So for the one that's coming out here, that's going to be right about there. So what I'll do is I'll have a splitter right here. That'll go here. And then this line will go there. And this is where I can plug in the full Mark 6 belt of the rubber. So I'm going to go through and basically just do that. So most of it will be basically up until that point. And then I'll worry about plugging up all of the actual inputs, which means then I have to go through and deal with the outputs. But for me, this is an easy way to go kind of step by step and not make everything just too crazy. So I'm going to go through and connect all of the blueprints, but most of that is really not that exciting. We'll get to some more of the actual load balancing here in a little bit. And as you can see, I finally plugged in all my power storage, so they're starting to charge. Some of them are already done. But now with these floors up here, I'm up over 20,000. So I have doubled my power storage with this factory so far. And for me, I think this looks so much better than the giant brick I have over at my coal plant. I'm definitely going to have to try to figure out more ways to incorporate the power storage. I think it's neat. You know, until one of you tells me that it's just going to kill my performance or something. Until then, I'm pretty happy with it. The organized chaos. Ah, isn't it beautiful? So all of the basic belting is done. So the quartz will come in on this line. So since everything kind of needed to come to the very center to get load balanced, I needed to go up and over it to bring in the initial amounts. If I had spaced them out a little bit more, I probably could have snuck them in straight through the middle. Actually, I probably could have if I wanted to, but coming up and over just adds to the little bit of chaos of all the load balancing, so I don't mind. And that's kind of the benefit of the manufacturers being so tall when you stack them, is having stuff this tall doesn't really look out of place at all. So that's all done. We've got the circuit boards like I showed. The radio control units are load balanced pretty much the same way. The only difference with this one is I needed 2 inputs for the aluminum casing. So there's this one, and then there's a mirror setup on the other side instead of them being all brought together like they are for the other 2. And same thing, because these need Quickwire, they'll have 2 belts to input, and then all of the rest can get load balanced into just 1 input for each one of those. Every once in a while, I'll leave myself just kind of a random sign because I know it's going to be a while till I come back to this part. So this was the one where I ended up with kind of some random numbers, and so each of these groups needs 640, so I can't group 2 of them because that would be 1280. So I decided to leave myself a sign just because I know it's going to be hours before I get to that part. And so this can really kind of help out in spots. I highly recommend it. And like for this, I did the same thing on this side. I'm going to need to use a 3-to-2 load balancer down below, so I can take the output from all 3 of these and merge them together onto 2 belts. So one plugs in there and one plugs in there, because these are doing the aluminum casing for the radio control units. I highly recommend leaving yourself some signs, and then once you take care of that, you can just delete it. But it can be very helpful in these builds that take, I think this one was almost 40 hours. Granted, I probably spent like 10 of those hours doing the decorating at the end. But hey, that's just minor detail. And then with these, I decided to let them go ahead and merge. Instead of doing the direct feed, this just looked cleaner on this side instead of doing it like I did with all of the assemblers. I could have split the assemblers up so that they were directly in line, but I think this looks pretty good. Alright, so I wanted to get to this point because I knew after I went through all of this belt work and getting things where I wanted, I'd probably want a little bit of a break from the factory. So now I need to work out a few more of my logistics. I have most things that I need already coming through by train. Like right there has all of the aluminum that I need. But I am now making more petroleum coke over in the West Coast, and I'm also making plastic that I need, and I haven't brought those over. And I briefly mentioned it when I was making the first floor of this factory. The nitrogen that I'm bringing in from all the way over there isn't quite enough. So I'm going to have to figure out a way to bring in just a little bit more nitrogen. I decided to tackle the nitrogen first. And that's because I am going to drastically change how I'm doing it. Basically, all of this, I'm going to delete. So we can just delete all of this all the way. Actually, we can just delete the pipes all the way to the factory. And then this whole bus is going to get deleted up until the point where it joined up with the quartz. Because obviously the quartz still needs to get bussed in. But all of the pipes and all of this infrastructure that I built is just going to get straight up deleted. Well, except for, this. I still need the nitrogen, obviously. Although you may be thinking, but what about power? Power? We'll figure that out. It can't be that hard to get power out here, right? With all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and zoop down just a few more foundations. On one of my other playlists, I recently put out a video going over using the drone ports and packagers, so this is one of those blueprints. And that's the wrong one, so that's the unload. Let's go with load nitrogen. Go ahead and nudge it into place and make sure. Yep, that looks right about... Yeah, that looks like a good spot. Alright, so we can go ahead and load that one. And I'm going to need 2 more. So the only downside about this blueprint is when you place them next to each other. For whatever reason, I think it's the beams. That's my only guess. So I have to actually nudge it 2 meters over, but that's okay. And then one last one, nudge it over 2 meters, and we've got our 3. And on the inside, I can just go through and use the filter tool, and I'm just going to delete these walls so that I can just walk in between all 3 of these. There we go. Oh, I guess you can't see the amount when it's powered off, but I'm pretty positive this one outputs 1500 in totals. So 2 of these will be 600 and the other one will be 300. So I'll figure out which one goes where and whatnot. But as far as power, since you're probably curious what I'm doing about that, I'm going to head right on over here and I'll show you. So I definitely could drag power all the way out here. Or this is the one use that I can think of for using geothermal. Now that's because I really like my main power grid just having a nice constant flat line. And that tells me that all of my power plants are working the way that they're supposed to be. As soon as you start adding geothermal generators, you're going to have variability in your production part of your power grid, and I don't like it. It's harder to tell when a problem might start showing up at one of your other ones, which is going to be producing just the large majority of your power. So I tend not to use the geothermal very much. But they do actually put out an okay amount, and I think that this is the perfect use for them. Let me throw together something real quick and I'll show you what I mean. So it definitely still needs some dressing up, but part of the reason I don't is there's 3 sulfur nodes, which I didn't realize were just like on top of each other, on top of these geothermals. So I guess I'll probably build something to incorporate all of these once I need these sulfur. So for right now, it's just going to be bare bones. But I've got these 2, and then I'm also connected down to that one all the way down there. Because if we look at it, these ones go from 2 to 600, right? So that means that they are going to average 400. And then same with that one. That one is also 400, and I believe that one is also 400. But unfortunately, if we take a look at the resource well pressurizer, this uses 503.7. And if we look inside of here, drone ports use 100. Between this 503 and then 3 drone ports, this needs 803. I could charge up a whole bunch of batteries and they would last for a really long time, but eventually it would fail. So I needed that extra one, which is a little bit of a bummer, but I just kind of built a little bit of a platform. I'm sure eventually I'm going to use that area, and so now I just have something to build around, and then I'll probably have to reroute that power a little bit. So to even out the power grid and make it more consistent and reliable, I just use the power storage. There is a way where you can turn one on and then you wait for it to be, I think, like halfway through its cycle and then turn on another one, and they should be completely offset that way. I'm not very good at timing things like that, so I would just much rather place down 2 power storage, and that'll be more than enough to handle any spikes in the power grid. I definitely could have just ran power towers from there all the way out. And I mean, it would have been, 1 or 2 more power towers. So it's not like it would have looked bad. But really, I just wanted to use the geothermal. And this was finally a way that I could come up with using them that would be useful. Kind of as a way to power my outposts. And honestly, they're really cool models. I just don't like them on my main power grid, that's all. Alright, so these are pretty much done. So it's pretty simple. You just plug the pipe right into the blueprint. And on the inside, if we come in, so I did kind of rearrange these so you can walk straight through to the other side. And then from any of these, you can kind of access the packager. And you can still kind of see what's going on down below, but not too much. It's kind of crowded, but that's okay. I wanted it to be a compact blueprint. So nitrogen gas gets fed into here. I'm going to empty a bunch of fluid tanks into each of these drone ports. And so empty fluid tanks will get loaded into here. It'll package it and send it right into the input of the drone port. And then that drone port will fly on over to the electronics factory. I have 2 dimensional depots hooked up to my empty fluid tank production over at the home base. So I can quickly just grab 5 stacks, and then in just over a minute, I'll have another 5 stacks. It could be faster. I have enough Mercer spheres. Maybe I'll go back and double it up again. But for now, it's fine. And so now for each one of these, I just take, a stack of 5, which I'll probably need more. It'll probably need 10 for each one of these just to make sure that there's enough. But thankfully, it's a really short trip, so I probably don't need a ton for each one of these drone ports. But if we come inside now, we can see it just working away. And the compression is really what makes this work. Going from 600 to 150 is amazing. Back at the electronics factory, like I mentioned, this spot right here is where I thought I would put some drones. And this is where all of the nitrogen drones are going. And then we've got our line of fuel coming in. And here is our fuel drone. And then I have one more drone port because this one will deal with the plastic. But since that doesn't need a packager, I just need to do some normal load balancing. And so placing my double drone blueprint down here works pretty well. So I've still got the space to do the load balancing for the plastic, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So thankfully, I don't need to fuel this drone port because it's going to get fuel on the other side where it picks it all up. I just need to fuel all the rest of them. So this is basically the one thing. I don't know if you can load balance it, so it is a manifold. I know it's shameful. And then I like this setup that I used at the other one, so I copied it on this side. And then I just used the gate hole walls on this side so you can walk across all the different drone ports. And then this way you can get to 2 of the packagers because I need 4 in total. The 3 of them are coming from that nitrogen port over there. And then the very last one is coming from right over here. Somehow a bean got stuck inside. I'm sorry, buddy. I don't know how you did that to yourself. If we take a look at the map, it is right here, right where I have no radar tower coverage. But it's directly underneath the train. That's where the quartz is. That goes up to the aluminum factory. So right here is a nitrogen well, and I'm only using this one, but obviously it just made sense to basically set up all the infrastructure. And so I can plug up some more drone ports here. Because I think this one puts out just a ton of nitrogen. Yeah, 3,000. So I'll be able to use this one. And thankfully, it being right here, it should be easy to ship to pretty much anywhere, really. But for this project, I just needed one 600 pipe. So that's how I have it set up for now. Well, I have been busy working on more of the logistics. And here is a short, funny story. Because I know some of you like to know my thought process on things. And here's what happens when that thought process goes wrong. I was looking at my numbers, and I know I need over 4,200 rubber. So I'm probably just going to ship out 4,800. And then if I need that extra, I could just use a drone. Since I already have drones over at that factory, it'll be convenient doing it that way instead of doing more load balancing here and over there. So that's a lot of rubber. And a lot of that rubber is going to the electrode circuit boards, which for that I need 4,800 petroleum coke. Well, that's a lot of petroleum coke. And I only had one train line that was available, and I didn't think that one train line would be able to handle just that many resources at once. So I spent about 2 hours laying down a second track and added on another floor, and that goes all the way back. Thankfully for most of this is really easy. You just put it in blueprint mode. I just snap on an extra pillar, and then whatever is directly below, I just snap that on. Well, you know, except for ramps aren't quite as easy. Those are kind of a pain. But you get the picture. Most of this is already done. I just needed to copy what was beneath it. So it's not like it was hard. It's because I completely forgot that I'm not making all the petroleum coke there. I am making all the rubber, but half of the petroleum coke is being made elsewhere. So one train line is actually all I need. So yeah, this whole second level that I built, I don't need. And I don't think I will ever need. So that was a complete waste of 2 hours. And since we're on the subject of horrible mistakes I've made in the last 30 hours, yeah, this would be another one. Alright, so if we take a look at the map, I am currently, over here. So this spot right here is making 2,400 petroleum coke, and that's half. My very first aluminum setup is also making petroleum coke, and that's making 1,200. And so that is going to get put on a train, and then I'll end up over here. So there's 3/4. Now, I thought that from the red forest, I was also making 1,200. I'm only making 1,000. So, turns out, that needs to go away. So thankfully, I have already ran the pipe all the way out here. So that pipe right there is 75 crude oil. So if we look at this setup, one refinery will intake 75 crude oil, output 100 heavy oil residue, and this one has the input of 100, and then it'll output 300. And so that will give me my 200 missing Petroleum Coke, and just with a little bit left over. So I'm basically just going to add a singular system right here, and it'll be out of place, out of shame, because I totally screwed all of this up. I had all the numbers available, I just read it wrong. And thankfully, there's already a belt here. I'll just have to switch this one to a Mark IV all the way back to the train station. But that should be easy enough. And then I'll finally have all the Petroleum Coke I need. Oh boy, what an adventure. For the next step, I came back out here to the Spire Coast, where I've got my array of random factories just out here floating in the ocean. But for this one, I'm actually going to add on to the train station. So I currently have some extras right here, and the one I want is the plastic. So I've got 960 being sunk, and for this, I just need 420. So I'm going to leave a bunch of it still sinking, but some of it is going to come out this way. And then right around here, I'm going to use a new blueprint that I've made, so I can split it between 7/16 and 9/16. 960 divided by 16 is 60. And so on the 7/16 side, we'll have our 420. And on the other side, we'll have 540 that will continue to sync until I need it for another project. And then that bit is going to come right out here. I'm just going to add just a couple more. I really think I probably only need 2, maybe 3. And then a drone port. So on the loading side, I really don't need anything extra. So I don't need an extra buffer storage container, because the drone port won't pause any of the belts coming in or out of it when a drone is docking. And so really, I just need to feed it and connect it to power, and it's going to be good to go. I mean, I will probably try to make it look a little bit better, but chances are there's going to end up being a couple more, because I could see myself needing to ship out a few more things by drone. So I might not do too much decorating until I know how many more I need. Plastic drone's been running for a little bit, so let me show you what's going on inside. So thankfully, real easy load balancing for this. We've got a Mark IV going into a merger, and then I need to use a Mark V, because this needs to be able to handle the full Mark IV and the return bit right here. So for the output side, you've just got a Mark IV going into a splitter, and then a Mark I. 480 minus the 60 leaves me the 420 I was looking for. And that right now is just being sent into the sink, just so I could test the throughput. And it's a good thing I did, because as you can see right now, it's only 351. But it's going to start climbing real soon. With only one drone, it couldn't transport quite enough with the distance that it was going. So all I had to do was go back and add a drone to that port. And with 2 drones going back and forth, I'll have no issue with the throughput. Well, doing the drones and trains was a nice little break. Well, now it's time to start doing the real belt work. So for a lot of these, the input is already available, so I just need to create a belt. And what I'm going to do is bring a whole bunch of them to this center point right here. And this is where I'm going to end up bringing up the resources from either all the way down at the bottom or from the first floor up to the second floor. I'm going to use this spot right here. And then I'm going to have a separate one for where the drones are bringing things in. So for a whole bunch of that, that's pretty boring and we can skip. But we do need to do some load balancing. The super easy belting is now done, and I gave myself some labels. So these are just temporary, but each one of these is 1200 Coke, and on the other side, I've got 2 lines, 1200 rubber each. And then for this, 840 rubber, and the only one that's colored purple and green is quartz, so that one's 1200. And I've done that for most of them, so thankfully most of these I kind of know which ones are which. But just having the numbers will just make things a little bit easier. So just temporarily, I'm actually going to have a more permanent place to list this somewhere else. But for now, it kind of helps me lay out exactly how many belts I need and all that jazz. But I still need to do a little bit more. So I've been working on this area right here. And so underneath here, I've got a couple things to plug in. So the nitrogen, well, that's going to be a whole mess out of its own. But right back here, we've got a whole bunch of floor holes. So this section right here is the one that I really need to do some load balancing, because these two are pretty easy. Each one of these needs 225, so I only need to plug in a 450 belt right into there, and that's done. This set of 9, however, is intaking 1920 aluminum ingots, and it'll be outputting 1280 aluminum casings. All right, so from underneath here, we can just go ahead and say that's the Mark IV, since that's the 450 line. So we'll get that plugged in somewhere, but I don't need to worry about that one. That one's easy. These three, however, so 1920, if I put that on two belts, that'll be 960 on each one. So that's how I'm gonna bring it into the factory. And using this blueprint, I can take two belts and turn them into three equal belts really easily. So if I get this placed just close enough, yeah, that'll be good. So the two 960 belts will get plugged into here. And then they'll get split up and recombine on this side, and I'll have my three 640 belts that I need. And there's the load balancing for the inputs. Now on the output side, we basically need to do the opposite. However, the only reason I'm using this blueprint on this side is most likely I'm going to have it so it's two equal belts of 960, but this does give me the option of doing a 1200 belt and then a 720 belt, and then this would still work out fine. Now on this side, I know for a fact that all three of these are going to be even. And let's take a look real quick. So 142.22, each set of three is going to put out 426 and 2/3. So that means we just need a Mark IV lift, and then we'll go ahead and grab a splitter here. And then I do need to replace the lift because it's not actually connected that way. And then on this side, now that I know the spacing, we can go and place this one right here, but this needs to be a merger instead. And so with this one, we're going to divide that in half. So 213 and 1/3. So just need a Mark III. Plug that into both of the mergers. And now we have it load balanced. And then I'm just going to throw down some more wall holes right here. And then we'll just bring those up and over using some lifts. Because right now they are conveniently at the second wall height, because this is a 2 meter and then I'm using two 1 meter walls, and then it's the normal wall. Makes everything real easy. So now we can just go from here to here, and if we go through to the other side, then we just need to connect it to this one right here. Now my 3-to-2 load balancer is done, and my 640 inputs are done, so I can just delete those. Alright, and that's honestly most of the load balancing done that's on this floor. To be honest, most of the load balancing is going to be done in the basement. So this right here is my idea. I just want to make a huge waterfall out of all of these Mark VI lifts because they've got the light that's going up the middle, and I just think it looks really cool. So for every resource that needs a belt going up to the second floor, I'm just going to do this. So chances are it's probably going to need to be a little bit longer. There's quite a few resources that need to come up here. And then I just made this a blueprint because, of course I did. It just makes things a little bit easier. They're every 2 meters so that a lift can fit right in the middle. And then for these, so if I go from the very top, it's 1 meter too far. So thankfully, I'm dealing with floor holes. So if I go from the bottom, look at the top, it'll snap right in. And then I just rotate it so I get the light facing on the outside. And there it is. I'm pretty happy with it. I think it looks pretty cool. So if we come up here, I moved all of my labels. Because this spot right here, my thinking is there's probably going to be, I don't know if it's going to be farther out or if it's just going to be right here, but there'll be some sort of wall. And then I'll have a walkway that goes back here. And then, so this part right here will be more or less kind of like hidden in the factory. But I can still kind of get to it and make sure that everything's running and I can check all the amounts. At least everything will be labeled, and if I ever come back, hopefully this will be useful to me. And now I can go around and clean up all the rest of the signs that I had placed because I really don't need them. Everything's labeled back here and it just goes from here to there directly. And honestly, it just helps a ton keeping things organized when I need to actually do the load balancing, which will be the next step when we go downstairs. But I unfortunately see something. I think I forgot 4 belts. Well, isn't that unfortunate? Especially because I can't really go this direction, so I can't really push this side. It would be so easy. They need to now squeeze in here, but I can't push these that far because that would just be too easy, right? That would have been awesome and convenient. No, no, no. No, now I need to push all the rest of these down by 4 so that I can squeeze these in. Yep. And there we go. We won't talk about how long that took me. All right, so everything is in here, and oh, look at all that. That is awesome and also a little terrifying. That is a lot of resources. And so while I was at it, I decided to extend this so that I could get all the rest of the resources from the train station on into the factory. So originally, to get this bottom floor going, I only needed these 3. And now I added all of these. So I think 4 of them should be Petroleum Coke, 2 of them will be rubber, I think 3 of them are aluminum, or maybe 4 are aluminum. Let's see where they go. Alright, so this is where I ended up doing a lot of the load balancing, was down here. So let's go through some of it. A lot of these are blueprints, so none of it's really that bad. So this first one that branches off is doing a 2/5 and 3/5 blueprint. I just needed to upgrade all the belts to the right speeds. But that's how I got the 840 to go one way, and then I have 560 still available. So these first 3 are rubber. These are 2 full 1200 lines because those are just getting plugged straight in. And then we've got some Petroleum Coke, and then we've got some more load balancing. So these ones drop down here. This one gets plugged into my new 1/5 and 4/5, but this handles a max belt speed. So in my normal 1/5 and 4/5 blueprint right here, if I place it, it'll be a little bit easier to show. Your initial amount comes in here, but the issue is if I have a Mark 6 belt plugging into here, this belt right here needs to handle this amount plus the part that is getting looped back. So the one downside to doing this blueprint is it's capped at 1000 parts per minute. That would be the limit of this one right here. However, if you start with a splitter instead of the merger, and then go into a merger and basically do the same thing, where on one side you just have 3/5 and that goes straight into a merger. On the other side, I've got this one, and here's 1/5, here's 1/5, and here's the part that loops back. But instead of going into that merger, it goes into a splitter and then goes to the 2 mergers on either side. And so this is how you can get around that full belt limitation when doing prime splits. And so just to make things easier on myself, I just added an extra little sign. So here's the 960, here's the 960, and then the 2 extras are 240s, and so those are getting grouped together. So right here is 480. The 480 then goes into this splitter, and that is getting split with a Mark 1 and a Mark 4. So this right here will have 60, this will have 420. The 60 then gets split in half. 30 I'm going to send to a sink, the other 30 we're getting regrouped up, and here's the 450 aluminum ingots that I need for the other process. A lot of these sinks were already down here, just basically in a different spot, so I rearranged them, relabeled them, so that now I know I've got 400 Caterium ingots free, 270 quartz crystal, 525 silica, and 450 Quickwire. Yeah, so funny story about the Quickwire. I thought I was making over 1,000 extra Quickwire, and that was just because the numbers all lined up really easily, so I might as well. And there's other projects down the line that need it, so I could drone them out or put them on a train somewhere. But it turns out, if you're going to make 240 stators, you should definitely input the right amount for the Quickwire as a requirement. For whatever reason, in my spreadsheet, put that each one cost 30 Quickwire instead of 60 Quickwire. So I was short 900 Quickwire for that side of the project. Thankfully, I had 1,300 a minute extra laying around, and that kind of saved me. Oh man. Yeah, you can see why this video took a while to come out. I made a few mistakes along the way. And then kind of the last bit of load balancing I did up here was for the extra Caterium ingots. Because I cranked up production and I was making way more than I needed. And that was definitely on purpose. Alright, so taking a look at this floor, this is what we're dealing with, is all of these right here. I did some load balancing to take 1,200 lines down to 750, which left me 450 over here. And so that's what we're dealing with, is all of these 450 lines. So 2 450 lines get grouped to a 900. The 900 then gets split up between 300, 300, 300. And that way I could get a 600 and a 600. And here is a 1,200. And this right here to me is the cleanest way I can get a completely full 1200 belt and it not have issues. It's best to be merging two of the exact same amounts. Like if one was 900 and then one was 300, it does not work nearly as well. And I think that's just because the merger doesn't have enough of an internal buffer to deal with the different amounts. And so the extra 300 from both of these are getting merged together, and now I've got a 600 line. And that 600 line is going to get merged up with the last 450 that I have, and then that's just going right into the sink. So this 1200 line, and then I also had 3 completely full Mark 6 belts that were just being sunk already, and those are going to go on a little journey all the way to the corner of the factory. So these snake around here, and let's just go ahead and head up. So that big open space, I definitely didn't use it all, but I decided to throw down some constructors. And you can probably already guess what these are making. Good old copper powder. Because I needed so few constructors and I have so much space here that I didn't bother overclocking them. So each group of 4 constructors is being fed by a 1200 belt, and each one will produce 50 copper powder. So 4,800 copper ingots a minute gets turned into a whopping 800 copper powder. But hey, this was basically just all the extra copper that I had laying around, so I'll take it. Next up, I need to do the pipes. I need 1 water pipe, and I'm going to need a couple nitrogen pipes to plug into that part right there. And this is going to make decorating interesting, I think. But I am going to just run the pipes probably right along here. The water is going to be coming from that extractor over there, and so I'll just need to run another pipe just right on over there, and it'll plug into the factory down there. I'll run it underneath, and then somewhere right about here, I'll bring it up, and then using this for both the water and the nitrogen, those can come up here, and then plug in right to over here. Holy cow. Didn't realize drones could take me out like that. And this is what I came up with. So just kind of running these all the way up. I've got 2 600 pipes and then a 300. Although I'm going to be able to downclock this one because I don't need 1500. I only need 1250. So if we come on inside, I can show you the balancing that I came up with. All right, here's the chaos. So thankfully I gave myself enough space down here that it is a little bit crazy, but it sure could have been worse. All right, so here's my thinking. And spoiler, I'm going to tell you right now, this did not work. But I thought it was interesting, so I figured I'd show it off. This was basically what I wanted to do as an easy solution. Mainly because I thought it would be fun to have that pipe waterfall running up the side. I thought it would look cool. And so whenever you have a pipeline junction, horizontally, everything is kind of the same. But when it's vertically like this, the bottom one gets prioritized first, and then it's the middle ones, and then it's the very top one. So my thinking is if I feed the 600 pipe from below, and then the extra that I need to top off each of these, which would be 25 on each side, so that's why I have it split right here in the middle, would have the very last priority. So it would use the full 600, and then it would just kind of get topped off by these ones. Even with valves in different places, I can tell you that eventually it just didn't work. But to be honest, I was curious just to see if it would work, so it was worth a shot. I wanted to know if this kind of a setup was viable in the future, and I don't think I'll be trying this again. The water pipe is fine though. I just need to take care of redoing this entire nitrogen pipe setup that I have going, and think of a different way to do it. And then while I'm at it, since that's basically the last thing I have left to get the factory up and running, I'm going to spend way too much time doing some more decorating. We can then take a tour, and then we'll watch it come to life. Earlier on in the video, I was over at that Caterium node because it had turned off randomly and running at like 95%, and I just really wasn't sure why. Well, I'm still not completely positive, but I think I finally narrowed it down during the course of this video. I had seen this problem somewhere, but had never personally run into it, and I had thought where I saw it was getting fixed. But I'm guessing maybe it hasn't quite yet. And the issue was my hover pack. So as I was going around with my hover pack and it was transitioning from one power switch to another, just all the machines on that grid would just shut off for 5-10 seconds. And I realized that when I went over to the aluminum factory to get that train set up earlier, I had taken a look inside and every machine just turned yellow, and I had just no idea why that would happen. So it looks like this isn't common, but it has been an issue for a little while, so I'm really hoping that it gets fixed. And so if that does end up being the issue, I totally get it. Bugs are in the game, they happen. Hopefully it'll get fixed soon. But for me personally, that one is one that is just going to absolutely drive me nuts if I'm just kind of flying around and my machine shut off for no reason that I have any control over. It will drive me absolutely insane. So the hover pack is now in the dimensional depot, and I went ahead and downloaded Pak Utility. So I am just using Fly right now. It's definitely not what I wanted to do. I wanted to get through the entire playthrough without using Fly and just using the hover pack. But I'm hoping that that's a good enough excuse that you all understand, because I really just, it was driving me nuts that I could not figure out why machines were turning off. And so far, only using the Fly mode with Pak Utility, I haven't seen any issue, and all the factories seem to be running fine now. So if that does get fixed, I'm happy to go back to my hover pack. But for now, I think I'm just going to use Fly, and I hope you don't hold that against me. But here we are. Now the factory has a whole bunch of walkways, and I've got a whole set of walls on the outside, so obviously I just came up with some more blueprints. So I was just messing around with throwing down the wall holes and then just kind of connecting the pipes in different directions and, you know, come up with some sort of pattern. And right here I just have two small billboards, and these are just using the blueprint grid pattern. So if you go to the select icon and then go to backgrounds, a lot of these are actually moving. So like even this one, it looks like it's just a square, but it's actually a grid that's moving across. But you can get all sorts of fun little patterns, and now I've completely screwed that one up. Hooray for copy and paste. Because with this factory, I didn't want to make just the entire thing glass, because I do that with a lot of them. So I wanted to switch it up and try making more of the walls solid, and then that way the windows are a little bit more highlighted instead of it just being a glass wall. So now we can see the bottom floor and the top floor through there. We got some of our water extractors down here. And then I did decide to go with one big window on the back. I mean, might as well. It takes up a big enough space. And then here we have this side. Let's take a look and see how I changed it up. I think this is probably going to come to no one's surprise, but my solution was to load balance it. So if we come down here, we can see how I did it. So it is preloaded, and I'm just going to have to take a couple of the bottles out later on just so it's not doing the stuttering belt thing, but that'll be really easy and I can show you when we get it started. But if we come in here, I deleted the packagers, so now we've just got this mess. So what I really should have done is delete these and go with the other drone port style that I have, because that would have given me more space to do any of the load balancing. But I'm stubborn and I like the way this looks. And I still have one packager because the one that's on this floor is completely fine. That one didn't have any issues. It was only because those four blenders need 312.5 meters cubed a minute. If they were under 300, all of this would have been so simple. But no, I had to make things complicated. And so basically this is the super compact load balancing that I came up with. But of course, you know, I did make it a blueprint. So I made a compact 125 balancer, so it's only using the small storage container, and then it's doing the same sort of load balancing that I do for my trains, where it loops back some of it into the storage container. So now when you come out of the drone ports, there's actually a stairway that you can get up into the main factory. And so the packagers got moved up here, and now there's a fourth one. So I think this is honestly the best way to do it. I was just being stubborn and wanted to try just using pipes. But this way is really nice. So each one is going to produce 312.5, which is the exact amount that the blender needs. And then I just have to mess with the load balancing. So if we go underneath, we can take a look. So the way this is set up is all four need the same exact amount. So we just have it split here and then split here. 1250 in total. When they get packaged, I needed 312.5. So that's how much packaged nitrogen is getting sent over here, and then it's just evenly getting split between all four packagers. And then the empty containers are just getting grouped up together, and then those merge underneath here. and then that is the empty line. So this line is full, but the empty canisters are going to run along this line and then head back down. But instead of going straight into the machines, this is where I need to do the important amount of load balancing. So this part is kind of hidden. I didn't give myself a way to get down here, which I probably should and probably will in the future. So I've got a 600 and a 300 available over here, and then a 600 over here. So it's 2 pure and 1 normal, or in other words, it's the equivalent of 5 normal nodes, right? So that's how I did the load balancing. Is I just did a 5-way split with the empty canisters, is we go into the merger, and then we just do our normal 5-way split. So this gets 2/5, this one gets 2/5, and that one gets 1/5. And that way, all of the drone ports will get the correct amount of empty canisters, and nothing will get clogged up this way. And then as long as I do the correct load balancing on the way out, that's why these first two have 125. But the very last one actually has an extra splitter, and it's going to do 62.5. So besides it being just, a little cramped, this ends up being just a fantastic system. Also went ahead and just added some signage onto the front because I had a little bit of extra space there. And then planning for the future, I threw some drone ports on the front. Now currently I don't actually have anything going into those. But if we take a look right inside through the doorway, here is that hallway that I can see everything. And this is where all the resources are coming up. But then I went and made it just extra tall. And part of the reason was that way I could add an extra row of conveyor wall holes. And there's 6 of them because if we take a look at this final part right here, these are the total amounts and they're all just going to be sunk right now. Thankfully, they all fit on one belt, so it's nice and easy. But in the future, I have plans for almost all of this. For some of these, there will be some left over. Like for the supercomputers, I'm making 25 because I need exactly 25 for the end game. But with circuit boards and maybe even the crystal oscillators, I'm going to end up with probably less than 10, just because rounding up to the nearest thing to give me all whole numbers is just worth it. So when the time comes to send these off somewhere else, I figure I can just throw them through those wall holes and then send them to the drone ports that are attached to the front. But not all these products are actually going to leave. I'm going to add a 3rd floor here. So I made the supercomputers because honestly, this amount of machines doesn't really take up that much power. And I was pretty much making everything else. So it just made sense to make these at the same time. The 2 that I truly need out of all of this are the radio control units, because now with those and the fuse modular frames that I made earlier, I can make pressure conversion cubes. The other is the electromagnetic control rods. We take a look at the power. Without the bottom floor turned on, we're sitting right around 90. So really not too bad. Once we turn on this factory, it's going to go up. It won't be too bad, but it's definitely going to jump up. And so I want to expand the power grid. And to do that at this part of the game, I feel like the best way, we might as well go nuclear, right? And I already have the numbers planned out, and so I know that there's a number of parts that I just want to get automated ahead of time and have those shipped in. Supercomputers aren't on that list, but since I was going to be already making most of this anyways, making this section right here just wasn't that much extra work. Now the 3rd and final floor, I probably won't get to for quite a while because I'll want all that extra power. The last piece that I'm going to be building up here is the superposition oscillators. And if we take a look, there's only one recipe available for them, and it needs dark matter crystals, crystal oscillators, so those I already have taken care of. Aluminum sheets, that's nice and easy. And hey, the excited photonic matter, that's basically just turning power into a resource. So that's pretty easy. But the thing is, the converters, and especially the quantum encoders, converters go from 100 to 400. The quantum encoder goes up to 2000. So if you add enough of them, I can start eating into my power grid. So that's why I'm going to leave the 3rd floor until after I go nuclear, because I don't really need them quite yet. I don't think I showed it off yet. So inside the train station, this is what it now looks like. A whole bunch of resources coming in. So they're all just coming up over here and then dropping down. And the load balancing for most of these is all just super simple. So let's see, those are outgoing. 600 blueprints and more 600 blueprints. This one I needed the 2 500s because that's what's coming from the red forest. and then the missing 200 that I fixed. So when you have the 3 different amounts, the storage container is honestly just an easy way to deal with it, in my opinion. Everything right now is just going into smart splitters. They're all set up so whatever direction is going to the awesome sink is set to any, and then the overflow is set into the factory. And then that way, in just a second when I go to turn this on, it's going to flip this power switch and turn all of these awesome sinks off, and that's going to get them all sent on into the factory. Before we get started, I thought it would be fun to take a look and see how many points I'm getting per minute right now. So it looks like we're averaging 1.5 to just under 7, a little over 6.5. I just keep forgetting to buy the golden nut when I'm back at the factory, and I've gone back a couple times and I just keep forgetting each time. At this rate, I'm going to be able to buy 2 by the time I finally remember. For the startup, we've got 2 that we need to turn off, and then the rest of them that we need to turn on. So most of these are getting miners turned on because all of the miners that are out here in the grassy fields are basically off right now. So all of the iron, caterium, and copper all need to get turned on, and then these will turn off the sinks. Let's get this party started. Up until this point, I've been sinking the aluminum casings that are going to be feeding the radio control units. And the reason is they just come out at so much of a higher rate than the other 2 items. We take a look. I only need 1.25 crystal oscillators and 2.5 computers, but 40 aluminum casings. And since these are made in a constructor and only need ingots, these get up to 100% just almost instantly. So the computers got here pretty quickly. The crystal oscillators have just taken a little bit to make its journey across the factory. But now we can go ahead and delete these sinks and get these sent in. There go the first supercomputers. So they are the last process to finally get up and running. Although it will take just a little bit longer to get completely up to 100%. And that's just because the radio control units on the far side just have farther to go on their Mark 1 belts. So I'm going to let this run for a bit longer so we can make sure that everything gets up to 100%. Let's take a look. What are we up to now? Oh, there we go. And after letting it run for a few more minutes and everything leveling out, I can confidently say we are over 10.5 million awesome points per minute. And that is going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for being here. As I mentioned before, the production planner will be linked below. I'll also throw together another folder in my Google Drive for a lot of the blueprints. So this one will just be the Grassy Fields Factory, and I'll just try to throw a whole bunch of them in there. But just as a reminder, I try to do all the load balance blueprints and those sorts of things with the Mark I designers so that anybody can easily use them. However, a lot of these endgame factories are using the Mark III designer. So if you want to edit them, you'll need to have that unlocked, or you can always just load up a creative save with everything unlocked already, edit it to however you want, and then load it back into your normal save. It's time to take over another biome. I'll be headed to the Rocky Desert to start another factory. It's time to get some nuclear pasta going. So look forward to that, and thanks for watching.